On today's conversation about power, I'm talking to Rhonda Parker Taylor, who's literally on a book tour at the moment. She is an academic, she's an author, she's a business owner, and she learned a lot of the skills that she's going to be talking about watching her father in action at a steel manufacturing plant. Now, she talks about empathy, she talks about self-awareness, and she talks about stress management, and that these are absolutely essential tools if you want to grow your business. We're going to be talking practical today. How can we grow our business by growing ourselves? Hi. And we are live with another episode of Conversations About Power. Today I'm talking to Rhonda Parker Taylor, who's coming from her book tour from Edinburgh, Indiana. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited about us connecting. We've had some really good, engaging conversations offline about power and strength and how it really builds not only our inner strength, but our external strength to the world in our businesses and in our attitudes and relationships. So I'm excited about this conversation, and I just can't wait for the listeners to hear some of the wonderful things that we've been talking about.
Right, great. So, Rhonda, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do before we get started.
Sure. My name is Rhonda Parker Taylor. I'm an academic researcher, an entrepreneur, and an author. And that sounds like a lot of hats, but really, when you think about life, you have to fulfill your passions. You have to give back, and then knowledge is the key and the foundation to everything. So really, it kind of pulls together quite nicely, because as I do the academic part, I'm continually being a life learner. But then at the same time, it helps me in my business and my personal life and my authorship, because I'm always engaged with other people and having different interactions. So that strength and power all comes back to, how do I manage self?
Right. So what's the thread in all of these things that you're doing? Because quite often when people do multiple things, there's some kind of single thread in there, which is what ties it all together. So, instead of saying, wow, she does a lot and how does she manage it and all of that. So what's this single thread for you?
I think the single thread for me is life balance, not being singly focused on one thing. So it allows me to stretch myself and realize that, you know what? Self-awareness of what's important to me as a human, instead of just being a person doing, being a human being, which means have part of my artistic ability. I have part of my business savvy and finances in it. And then I also have the knowledge base to continually absorb knowledge from different fields. So the ability to bounce, and I would say it's kind of like this. If anybody's watching on a platform, you're
Right.
like a scale, and you have all these things that you like to do, but are you spending time doing it? Are you self-aware enough to know that your inner strength is built on you knowing who you are?
Right. Okay. So that's the single thread. It's the self-awareness. It's doing what you enjoy, and you obviously enjoy doing a lot of things. So
Yeah.
a lot of different things. Yeah. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think traditionally we've been brought up to think that we have to focus on one thing, and that's our life. Sensible people focus on one thing and they just do that. But hey, we don't need to do that, do we?
Well, and I think that it's the single focused has benefits to it. And it's not that we disregard it. I grew up with a manufacturing background, with my family owning a steel manufacturing plant. So when you're in a manufacturing environment, you have certain things you have to do in sequence. So you find, if you're multitasking or mentally trying to stay balanced in a few different areas of domains of your life, you still need to be good in those areas and have those processes in place. But at the same time, aren't so singly focused that you feel boxed in and trapped in one way. And for me, that's what's important. Knowing what's important to me. We're all uniquely made. I may like puzzles. Someone may like hiking mountains, and if you know what those strengths are and those unique abilities and desires, then what you can do is you can put it in almost into a self-care. It's emotionally knowing that, there are processes that we follow. We have, problem solving. We have different steps to make. But what are the things that I'm intended and my purpose is built around?
Right. Yeah. So let's go back a little, if that's okay, Rhonda. So you grew up in a family that was about business,
Mm-hmm.
with a manufacturing plant, metal, that's processes, it's procedures, it's,
Right.
it's all of that. So you grew up in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened that made you think, hey, I want to do this, I want to go into academia? Or
Well, my dad was a very wise man, and
right.
he used to tell us that if it was meant to be, it's up to you. And then he also would tell us that you could work here if you want to. But before you do, you must go out into the world for at least a year and come back and bring us that knowledge. So when he sent me out, I found that I wanted to excel in education because honestly, it was a weakness. I struggled in my elementary and high school years with knowledge based stuff. And so I was like, this is something I really want to accomplish. And I found out that I could be good at it. So I, started out with my associates, then my bachelor's, then my master's, then my doctorate. And I realized, wow, I'm smarter than I think. I actually had a college professor that said I was smarter than I thought and smarter than I talked. Because from a more laid back steel manufacturing background, I didn't talk like academia. And that really blew me away for a second because all my life I had been kind of told that, okay, well, you might go into, retail, or you might go into, because I was not known as the smart one. And then I was introduced to Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence. And oh my goodness, if anybody's out there that says, I'm just not smart, I can't do it, and you have all that negative self-talk, read his books. It tells you that you don't have to be the brightest bulb in the bunch because you have people skills. You have the soft skills out there. And when you have the soft skills, you know how to lead. And what I mean by that is EQ is the right brain, left brain dichotomy. So you have your left brain out there telling you about facts and math and English and all the things that we're taught, and you get good grades if you have a good IQ. But if you have a high EQ, which is the right brain, which is the artistic, more abstract thinking, you'll have better intrapersonal skills. You'll have better interpersonal skills, and you'll have better stress management, and you'll have a better general mood. And what that means is you're creating another form of being successful. And they found that people that nurture their EQ are more successful than the people that just focus on IQ. And what that means, it doesn't mean that people with IQ aren't successful, because we all know there's Einstein, there's lots of people out there that are very smart people, but they probably had people around them that helped them with the EQ if they didn't nurture the EQ already. And so what that means is you can manage yourself and others. How that works. If you're self-aware, you've already done a deconstruction of self. You know your biases, you know your strengths, you know your weaknesses. You know your impulses. You can manage them in a way that doesn't hurt yourself or others. And then when you can do that, you can actually start building your teams, managing this stress in the environment and your impulses, and keep the mood in a productive way.
Right. Yeah. So it sounds, when I'm listening to that, it sounds like you were at school. It didn't really click while you were there, and it was discovering this EQ aspect. That's when it's like the light bulb went off. What? So what was school like for you then?
Oh, it was lovely. I had a great school experience, but I was social. So, like,
Right.
back to my first grade, I found my report card from first grade, right? And it said at the bottom where the note from the teacher to my parents said, Rhonda needs to be able to learn to work independently, and then when I got to my senior year, I had to pass my English proficiency. Now, look, I'm an author. Thank goodness for that teacher, right? So I went to a small private school, and we had to have a B or a better to graduate. So it's my junior year. You take the test. I didn't pass. And one of my English teachers said, I know you can do it. Let me tutor you over the summer. So I got an Arby's job, and I was, up at the counter trying to make money so she could tutor me. And we were sitting on the floor, and she was going through the stuff that just wasn't clicking in my head. And then it came time for me to pay her at the end. And I said, what do I owe you? And she said, just pass the test. So I had these models of mentors that believed in me. And my first book signing of Crossroads, all those people came back to my opening and my kickoff of Crossroads, because not only did they believe in me, they believed in the model of mentorship. And so, like, even today, I could say that one of the administrators keeps in touch with every student. He's been there for almost 40, 50 years, and still sends the birthday messages, still sends the support, shows up for funerals and everything else. And it's like, what a blessing to have that model of mentorship that, no, they're not going to do the work for you. No, but they're going to be there for you to support you in your journey of growth.
I love that. What I really love about that story, apart from the fact you presumably passed, which isn't even the point of the story, but you expected to pay, and you weren't told you didn't have to pay. Nobody decided to pay for you. Your parents didn't pick up the tab. Nobody picked up the tab. So that meant you were focused on that success all the time, all the way through the summer, because you were thinking, I've got to earn the money to pay this woman because of this. So that upped your motivation.
Yes.
Really to a high level. I think there's some very smart adults around you who decided not to step in and help you and let you get through that. How old were you?
I would have been 16 and 17.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
in today's model, we do sometimes take away the autonomy to be successful. Helicopter parents.
yeah. Yeah.
Where we hover over, and we're all guilty of it. And really, that one mentor changed the whole trajectory of my life. Now, I can look back, and we laugh about it now. My father was, the spear of the rod, spoiled the child kind of person. And, he had a very unique way of handling us. And people might say, oh, that was too tough. But you know what? I know how to bend steel. I know what a manufacturing plant looks like. If we were going on a same family vacation and we wanted to make money for whatever, I know how to bend steel. I know how to do a paint line, and I know that money matters, and I know that in a manufacturing environment, which clicks in my head every time I'm planning something, every movement, every step costs you. So when you go back to that emotional intelligence model, you're going to say, okay, when I walk in a room as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and I put my entrepreneur hat and I have some problem solving to do, I have to think about that manufacturing process, but I also then have to put the EQ model in to the effect of how is this change going to affect not only each department, but each person that's doing each job. So I can't go in and say, okay, this is the change we're going to do. It's a process. We have to pull them along and say, okay, this is the problem. Now let's come up with a solution that changes it where it is efficient for every person in this room. Because if we don't do that, no one buys in. And we don't get the best solution. Because maybe accounting is a quieter individual that doesn't want to descend and say, that's going to make all interest bills come out wrong and we're going to have to manually calculate things or whatever it might be, or maybe the mailroom's not going to tell you that the letters aren't going to print right or whatever the problem solving model is. So there's a process of learning from the others, which then go back to my first grade, must be more independent. Is not your normal IQ model. You make a decision and then you implement it. No, if you get the input, then you go to the IQ model and make it a efficient process. So you can't go one without the other. But if you focus on that EQ, and I'll tell you what happens, you go with the interpersonal, then you go to the interpersonal where you're creating that model to be successful. And then the stress management just kind of withers away because you don't even have to really manage that much because you've got everybody's input. One of the leaders that took the EQI test, which is to test your EQ, in a study I did, was like, I don't understand why I'm not successful. And I said, well, let's take the test and see, what's going on. But he had a high EQ, and it baffled me at first until I looked at the different characteristics of EQ. Impulse control and stress management were almost to zero. So every single exciting event, golf outing, party, drinks after work, whatever, he was gone. And then every stressful event, he was hiding under his desk with his door closed. You can't manage that way, so the EQ model helps people be successful because they learn how to navigate their own self and the self of others to prevent that stressful tension between people.
Yeah, and I'm listening to you here, Rhonda. There's lots of thoughts going through my head at the moment because I'm originally from the UK, and our management model is more like an American model. It's more top down. The boss says this is what needs to happen. Everybody is supposed to go and do it. So communication is generally more top down. Which means that a lot of information that you need gets stuck somewhere and doesn't go back up. And I live in the Netherlands, which has got a much flatter organizational structure. So here, everybody talks about things endlessly before things start. Which I always say, if you want to get somewhere quickly, use the American or the UK model. If you want to do it well, you're better off using this model. But but it can take forever. It can be very frustrating to manage. But because in the other extreme is if everybody thinks they're allowed to comment on everything all the time endlessly and they never stop complaining and never get on with it, that's also really frustrating. That's the other end of the scale.
You have to make a decision eventually.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, but if you can get people on board, what I experienced myself, when I used to be a project manager, the more I could get people on board and buying into the solution, feeling like it was their solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A beautiful model of success. You're right. You have to have the deadline of when the decision's got to be made, the input, and you still have to manage that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And know that there's time for both. Now, the top down, if it's an emergency situation,
absolutely,
that top down, boom, do this. You have to have someone that's willing to lead and take the outcomes and the consequences for the decision. So yes, you have to have that a combination of saying, okay, we've talked enough. This is it. This is where we're going with it. Then you go into that risk management. Okay, we've made this decision and we know what the outcomes are because we've talked through it. So now we have to solve and check back and make sure the risks are being managed of that decision.
Yeah. So suddenly remembering a situation as well where I got called into a meeting with about 5 hierarchical levels above me, people panicking about they needed a server to be installed, and they were all sitting there. Oh, what should we do? What should we do? What should we do? I said, look, if you want this thing done, it's a really tight deadline. Let me get on with it. How do you want to be informed? Tell me, I'll inform you, but don't sit here and take up all my time.
Right.
Because we've really got to get this thing done. And it was really interesting to see that at a moment like that, as you're saying, the sit around and talk about it model is useless.
Right.
It really doesn't get it done, because sometimes you just gotta run with it and cut through the bureaucracy and get on with it. Yeah.
And in that particular case, you know what you need.
Yeah.
So the talking then is, okay, how is this server going to affect your department? How is your, the process and do the testing, so the decision was already made when you realized and identified you need another server.
Yeah, exactly. So the only thing I needed to know is, how do you want to be kept in the loop? Because these people were panicking. So I knew that I would keep them calmer if I kept them in the loop. So how do you want to be kept in the loop? So I sent them daily updates for about 3 or 4 days, and then nobody asked ever again. They were happy after that. Yeah. Fascinating how these things work. So Rhonda, so you've come from this background of manufacturing, and, you're obviously somebody who looks further. I mean, you talked about your father being a wise man. So he was obviously somebody who observed as well. He wasn't just somebody who did, by the sounds of it. So what do we really need to be aware of as business owners? What's really important for us to know?
Well, the first thing is, as a business owner, you can't keep yourself in the dark. And what I mean by that is you constantly have to do an internal scan and external scan of your environment. I'll give you, you were talking about my father. The one thing he always would tell me is, never let any customer be more than 30% of your product line or your services or whatever it might be. And he would, even at 84 years old, he would come in every day and get the mail. He didn't process everything, but he would see what was coming in. And then he would always drive around the plant. Now, he started his business in a barn. So the plant is now a fairly large manufacturing plant. And he would drive around, and he says, you always need to know what's going out the back door. Then he would read the paper every day to know what was going around in the environment, business-wise. And then he would walk the plant internally and talk to the employees, the old walk around program before it was popular. The employees knew him as $100 Bill because his name was Bill. And in the United States, our currency is the bill. And of course, everyone wants the $100 bill. But if he saw something that he approved of, he had done it informally, and then we set a budget for it. He would reward employees by giving them $100 bill. And then the other thing that he would do then is he would also then get the complaints and the positives, or he would learn maybe if someone was ill or their car had broken down or whatever their woes were. So he kept informed, even though, there's still distance in that management, to know where his employees were. And he taught us as children that it is not about our passions. We may love to be in business. We may love being an entrepreneur. Maybe we don't want to be in manufacturing, and steel, because I still have family members that are in steel. Some of them loved it, some of them, but it's about employing families and caring for them. And what that taught us is we can have passions. He loved to snow ski. He had all these passions that he loved to do. But he had to stay grounded in the fact that people relied on his decision making, because that's how they fed their families. And luckily, because of that model that he's taught us, we've never had to lay off, even in the manufacturing environment.
Wow.
He stayed small and tight.
Yeah.
And think about it. What's in the news today about the American model of manufacturing is that they all went overseas.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Out in Indiana, at Noble Industries, they have stayed strong because he never over-employed, never under, maybe a slight, overtime kind of a situation, but that was still providing for families because they could make more money.
Yeah.
And he made sure that we weren't reliant on one customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for entrepreneurs everywhere, that is a model of success that is easy to follow. There's all the other things that have to do with industry, but for me, for example, I would flip through industrial, magazines to learn about the new stuff and stay updated in the knowledge base, just like he did with the newspapers and magazines. And I always think, never put everything in one basket.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
then you're flying go away, you're in, trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because if you've got like over half of your business is in one thing and then that fails, then you're really in a big, big problem, aren't you? And it gets really, really difficult to get out of that. So it sounds like your dad was a very, very sensible man.
He was pretty sensible, and he was tough. Like he couldn't fail. He had 5 children that he had to feed, so he had no options but to be successful.
Yeah.
And there's different realms of successful. He started in a barn.
Yeah.
He had another job. He had to keep moving. So you kind of take that entrepreneurial spirit with management to model and combine them to be successful. You can't just be the entrepreneur and you can't just be the manager. If you don't put them both together, there's going to be, you have to have at least those both hats in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rhonda, if I say the word power, what associations do you have with it?
Well, the first one would be strength. You have to have internal strength and self-awareness to have any power. Because if not, you'll suck it out of everybody else and you'll be deflated like a balloon. Another thing that I would say, and I had a podcast with with Merrill Hemingway, and I was writing a book on resilience, and she knew it. And the topic was strength. And so she's asking me these questions. Well, what about strength? What about strength? And so I'm talking about all these cliches that I've written on resilience. And she said, but what happened to Rhonda when she's strong? And I really had to think about that. And you have to realize that if you don't balance power and strength, the human disappears.
Yep.
Because you can overpower. So you have power also means understanding the impact of that power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. On yourself and on others as well.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's just something that you have and you're using it wildly, it's a dangerous thing. But yeah. So when do you feel most powerful?
in the morning.
Oh, well, that's so not an answer I would give. Tell me, Rhonda, how does that work?
So when I'm fresh and I'm having my coffee, I open my blinds, I look out at nature, and I'm kind of mindful and grounded, and I realize, okay, today is going to be a successful day and I'm going to make it. I do that affirmation. And, it might mean that I do, anybody that does deep breathing or any kind of mindfulness, you usually do 3 counts or 4 counts and then down, and then you're feeling pretty good and relaxed. And then to get that power, I do what they call an animal growl at the end.
Okay.
And so I pick a line and then I'll go, "Rawr," and then I'm ready to go for the day. And I know that my mind is right and I've taken care of me physically and emotionally and mentally. So I'm ready for whatever the world has for me. And as my father would tell us, going back to some of his analogies, make every day great. And when you do that, you know that it's up to you to make it that way. It's up to you to be successful. And it's up to you to manage those problems.
Love that. I love the idea of the animal, the animal roar or sound. Absolutely love that. I'm going to give that a go. So, Rhonda, what do you enjoy about power?
That it gives you the influence to change lives. Because it doesn't matter if you're offering a job or a book signing and there's someone that's tearful and they've just lost their spouse of 67 years, and you get that chance to kind of nurture their inner being and letting them know that it's going to be okay, or they just had a baby, or they're in the office and they're trying to figure out a big deadline and they just can't figure it out. You can influence others with that power in a positive way. You can feed children. You can help families. You can make a product successful. And that's the one thing I tell authors all the time. They're like, well, I want to be a successful author. I've got a novel or whatever. And I said, okay, first, it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of margins in books. And you have to remember, it's a product. That means you have to make it successful too. So you have the power to do it. You have the power to make a difference. You have the power to be kind. And if we open every day with kindness and end it every day with compassion, we wake up a better human. And that power allows us to change ourselves and others in positive way, no matter what domain we're talking about: work, education, family, relationships, whatever it may be. If your relationships are suffering, do one act of kindness. I'll give you a tip. Take a piece of paper, costs no money, write 100 things, 50 things, 10 things, whatever you can think of about your loved one that you love about or you appreciate about them. Make them into little Tootsie Rolls, put them in a box, and leave that when you have a late night meeting and you're not going to be there or whatever, so that there's no disappointment, no disillusion. And when you can do that in your daily life, whether it be work, family, then you end up gaining even more power and influence because people trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, is there any advice that you could give business owners about power, about their own power, or how to use it, or
Man, that's a lecture within itself. The
off you
main,
go, Rhonda?
yeah, the main thing is to practice that emotional intelligence, because your power has has the ability to change positively and negatively, and you continually have to nurture yourself to make sure you stay balanced. Because if you're not self-aware of how you're using it, or you let yourself get burnt out, then you're not nurturing yourself, and that power can become a negative influence and a burden to you. Because the burden comes when you have power and you have no energy to match it, and people are still looking at you to do things, and you have the inability to do it because you've become too pulled away from the daily activities or the decision making model.
Right. So, before we finish off, we've been saying that you're on a book tour, and we haven't talked about the book very much. So, can you tell us a little bit about the book before we finish off?
I would love to. So the first one, if anybody's watching, it's called Crossroads. It's a suspense novel. You're gonna say, "What's that got to do with business power, etc.?" But it's an exploration into life balance through a suspense model. So it's fiction. All the sites are real to Indianapolis. So you have the Circle the City County building. You get to know all about Indianapolis, but the main characters are all out of life balance. You have the workaholic that has lots of power in finance. You've got the law and order guy that has lots of power in in um in the justice system. And then you have the kid that's lost, that's loyal to friends, and now he's in trouble. It's a whodunit thriller, and it's my way that if we can entertain each other, you can read through it. And as Meryl Hemingway said when she endorsed it, is it's a crossroads. We always are hitting crossroads. And even chocolate has an expiration date. So it's a way of going through and say, how do I make those cuts when I need to? How do I make those changes in my life when you need to? And then my model of writing is I've released Crossroads. Then there's Life Balance and Resilience coming out, which are workbooks to help us kind of work on our issues and our meditation. And then there'll be another fiction novel coming out afterwards. So
Right. So you're writing workbooks to go with
yeah,
a novel. Right.
yeah,
That's unusual of itself. I mean, business books with workbooks, we know that,
uh-huh.
or spiritual books, self-help books with workbooks, we know that model as well. But a novel and workbooks, that's new. That's interesting, Rhonda.
Thank
So
you.
yeah. So, is there any last thing you'd like us to know?
I would love to tell everybody listening, thank you for joining us today, because Lynn and I have been planning this for you forever. And I hope that you got something out of it. And just remember, your own individual power is unique. You don't have to follow a specific model. You have to know who you are and where your God-given gifts are from, and use them. Make every day great. Start with kindness, end with compassion, and just know that if it's meant to be, it's up to you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rhonda.
Thank you. You guys have a wonderful day, everybody.
Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, why not try out this episode or this one instead and find out more about how power can work for you and your business?